We are literally live. Welcome, Dov, Christian, Stu, and Greg. I'm going to let you guys do a little intro of yourselves, just maybe 30 seconds, and then the format is going to be each of you get about 10 minutes to talk about your books. What are they about? Why did you write them? All that good stuff. Any tips for aspiring authors, etc. Along the way, I'll explain a little bit about my story and how we got to create this series, and the book that I wrote about productive accidents, which is pretty closely aligned to Christian's book about serendipity, and how I met Greg, how I met Stu, how I met Dov via Greg, and Christian via LinkedIn and via Diana Wu David. All these good things that keep on connecting and collaborating over time. And this is going to be fun. So Dov, over to you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, everybody. Nice to be here with everybody. I'm honored to be in your space. Dov Baron, international speaker. Been a speaker for about 36 years, best-selling author of several books. I have two podcasts. One is called Leadership and Loyalty, and the other one is called Curiosity Bites. Leadership and Loyalty is the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 listeners across the world. It's been around for about 14 years. As I said, I speak internationally. I've spoken at the UN, the World Business Conference in Iran, servant leadership, speak on a range of subjects that are related to what we call emotional source code, which is developed around emotional maturity, which is the deeper level of understanding of what emotional intelligence is, and understanding what is the one red thread that moves through your life. People look for their purpose. One Red Thread, by the way, is the name of my book, and they look for their purpose, and this is how to find it. I'll let everybody else jump in.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm going to jump across to Christian.
Thanks so much, Peter. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Wonderful to be here today. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Well, I had an experience pretty early on in life that made me realize how quickly life can be over, and so it put me on this intense search for meaning, trying to figure out what is life all about. And I realized what I enjoy doing the most is connecting ideas, connecting people, and then somehow initiating some kind of meaningful change out of this. And so I started out building a community called the Sandbox Network that brings together young innovators around the world and helps them make ideas happen. And then a couple of other enterprises and social enterprises that are about purpose-driven leadership. And then at some point moved more into academia, and I used to run the Innovation Center at the London School of Economics, which was all about saying, how do we, build business models that are doing well and good at the same time? And now I'm responsible for the Global Economy program at New York University Center for Global Affairs, where we try to understand how do we build an inclusive capitalism that somehow, has businesses in it that do well and good at the same time. And along that journey, what I found fascinating was that the most successful, purpose-driven, interesting people, they seem to have something in common, which is that they intuitively cultivate serendipity. They see something in the unexpected, they connect the dots and then turn that into positive outcomes. And so that's why I wrote that book, The Serendipity Mindset, which is all about a science-based framework for cultivating serendipity, and then kind of exercises that we can all use and stories that we can all learn from to cultivate more serendipity in our life.
Amazing, and completely resonates on lots of different levels. We'll get into that a little bit later. I'll jump across to Greg next.
Hey, I'm Greg Larkin. I wrote the book, This Might Get Me Fired. I wrote that book after a lifetime of working as an entrepreneur who got acquired and had to make the difficult journey from startup entrepreneur to corporate entrepreneur. And what I learned is that inside of the organizations that desperately need to launch new businesses and transform old businesses, innovate in order to remain resilient, in order to not die, that simultaneously those organizations destroy the lives of the innovators who work there. And I wrote the book because what I realized is that the people who make the breakthrough, the people who are able to overcome innovation obstructionism inside of large organizations are often people who say, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway, even if it gets me fired, I don't care. That was the kind of red thread that I identified as kind of running through successful innovation in the enterprise, and I wanted to bring that to the forefront. That's why I wrote the book, and that's been the driving force of my professional life. It's the reason huge companies bring me in to do advisory work for them, is to kind of build out a operating system for empowering entrepreneurs. It is also the driving force of my speaking work. It's the driving force behind my next book that I'm writing right now.
Awesome. Excellent. Now we'll jump across to Stu, and I'm sure he's got some dots that can be connected across all of these themes, because he's written about, how many books have you written, Stu, in your lifetime?
16.
Okay.
Yeah, 16. I'm working on number 17 to hopefully come out in February of early next year. But connecting the dots, great introductions there from our fellow conversationalists. Greg, I've definitely been fired several times. There's actually been a few times in my corporate career where I begged to be fired just to be released from that corporate captivity. So basically, I arrived in Australia. I'm coming to you live from Australia this evening. I arrived here in Sydney on the 14th of March 2020, last year. I'd packed my bags for a 5-day trip to come to Sydney. I was living in Thailand at the time. Said to my dear, beautiful wife, love you and see you at the weekend. Well, that's now 18 months later. So I guess I'm living a pivot at the moment, COVID-enforced pivot, which has obviously disrupted our world immeasurably. And yeah, the book which I'm going to focus on this evening, called Pivot Power, is really all about that, is how do we find certainty in an uncertain world. So I've been a storyteller for 30 plus years. My mathematics are not that fantastic, but 30 plus years, starting off in the advertising industry, which was a lot of fun, and then segueing, I guess, into journalism and, well, tour guiding and authoring and training and development, etc., etc. And yeah, a lot of that is connecting dots, connecting people, looking for adventures. When I'm not writing, I'm riding. I'm a great motorcyclist, and seeing the world on two wheels is my, I guess, preferred modus operandi. So yeah, that's it. I mean, I do a lot of speaking as well, a bit like Dov. I've addressed the UN, actually something for the World Tourism Organization on trends and innovation, and was keynote speaker at the World Marketing Congress, which was in Mumbai a couple of years ago. So yeah, I get around.
Very good. And one of these days I'm going to jump on a motorbike and join you in Chiang Mai and cruise down. I think you'll end up in Singapore, don't you, when you do that road trip?
Yes, that's one possibility. But you go to Chiang Mai, and I'm going to be in Hokkaido. That's on my bucket list.
Oh yeah, we're all going to converge in Niseko at some stage. If any of you like Singapore, then that's in our future. And if you like music, like I know Greg does, Fuji Rock Festival, camping with 50,000 people with children and anyone else that wants to tag along is a highlight. We've been there 3 years in a row up until COVID, and front row for The Cure and Chemical Brothers and Tom York and everyone in between. So music, I'm sure, is something that links some of it. I think everyone here must appreciate good music.
Absolutely.
And just connecting and having these random conversations is a recurring theme as well. So I met Stu because I think you either reached out to me or I reached out to you on LinkedIn. We could go back and look at the record, because I think you were hosting a Seth Godin gathering or something in Bangkok. And I just finished the Alt MBA, and I thought, hey, here's someone I should have a chat to. Next thing I know, you're a musician, and you were coming to Hong Kong, and I was learning the drums with my daughter. So we went to the studio, and you played guitar and I played drums, or my daughter, or whatever happened. And you've stayed with us subsequently in Hong Kong. And in fact, that was how I met Greg as well. Like, he reached out and said, hey, we seem to have some shared interests, and I'd learn about Greg's book. This might get me fired. I'm a big fan of how does innovation happen. And next thing you know, I was saying, hey, you should come out here, stay with us, and I'll organize a bunch of speaking events for you. But before that could happen, I was invited to go to New York and speak at a training course. And I'd volunteered to be someone that came in at the end of a training program called Working Across Offices or something like that, and just describe a day in your life. And I put my hand up. I think I was the only person in the room that said, "Yeah, I'll give that a go," fully expecting that I'd probably end up in Singapore or Manila or something like that in the region. But the fact that they came back and said, "Hey, we need you to be in New York for 2 back-to-back courses. Can you be there?" And I'm like, absolutely. And had an amazing week. I think it started off with a baller dinner on the Monday night where I met Greg for the first time. By the end of that week, I stayed with him and his Scottish wife and their 2 kids in Greenpoint in Brooklyn. He gave me his punk rock teenage tour of the suburb and surrounding areas, which was amazing. Mm. And, all of these amazing things just keep on happening. And subsequently, he's created a group called Punks and Pinstripes, which is where I discovered Dov because he was the guest speaker last week. And prior to that, Jamie Mustard was going to be here, and then he had to step out because I think he's on the road somewhere. And Dov jumped in, and all of this fluidity just keeps on happening. And Christian, your book is Parallel Universe to Productive Accidents, which is based on the research of Ron Burt, who was a professor at Chicago Booth when I did that program, and I was living in Singapore. And he'd gone back 100 years to look at how does innovation happen. And he basically boiled it all down to a single phrase, which was put yourself at risk of productive accidents, which and a perfect example is, do you want to be on this random podcast on a Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and just see if we can create any magic? And I'm pretty sure we will by the end of this episode and in perpetuity. So I'm going to pass over to Dov to go dig deeper into his book, One Red Thread, which also resonates with me because I've read John Wood's book, which is on a similar theme, Purpose Incorporated. And it'd be good if you can go deeper on that. And I'll hand over to you for the next 10 minutes or so. I think you're on mute, Dov.
There we go. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Right. So thank you. So the simplicity of it is the book is called One Red Thread, and it aligns with everything everybody's been talking about. My background is pretty wide and full of delicious variety. Studied religious philosophy around the world, traveled the world, studied with different teachers from Vedanta to the Tao to Gnostic and Coptic Christianity, Kabbalah, and a bunch of others, and then sort of stumbled into Jungian psychology, and then from there into the study of excellence, which today is called leadership, and then in early 83, 84, on a trip to Melbourne from Perth, I discovered, or I didn't discover, it discovered me, whatever. There was a serendipity to understanding quantum physics and neurosciences, which I've been deeply buried in ever since. And I was always looking for what is the connection between these things that I seemed to know there was a connection, but I didn't know what it was. And of course, now it's popular language to talk about purpose. And I came to write the book because I was very clear that most people did not understand purpose. Please understand that there's no disparaging commentary here to anybody. I love Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, but I always refer to it as, remember the first word. It's the start. So when I talk about one red thread, it's not about finding the purpose in that level. It's finding a much deeper purpose within you that is compelling you and actually has been woven into every area of your life. In the book, I start the book by telling a story, excuse me, and the story is that imagine that you're walking into a gallery, and as you walk into this beautiful gallery, over there somewhere, there is this amazing hanging tapestry, and you go up and you look at it, and you're in awe of its beauty and its elegance and its detail, and yet it seems so simple. And then you look down at the plaque on the floor, and it says that this is a tapestry of life, and it is called One Red Thread. And it explains that throughout this tapestry, there is a single red thread that is pulled throughout the entire tapestry. You can't always see it. It's visible in certain places, but not in others. But if you went to the back, you'd see that it runs throughout, and that is a metaphor for your life. And so the question becomes, What is the one red thread of your life? What is the purpose of your life? In all that research that I had done and all that background I wrote a thesis around personal emotional resonance fields, which is very aligned with Christian's work around serendipity, but understanding how we are all connected and that we are pulled towards certain people and repelled from certain people. But the key is that what is making that happen is the high emotional impact of our life. So the events that our life that had high emotional impact have become the source code, the emotional source code for what pulls us through, what makes us do what we do, even when it seems counterintuitive, why we do those things. And it talks about how we need to examine that, because we love to think of ourselves as these logical, rational beings. And of course, we are not. We're emotional first and rational second. That's why we tell ourselves rational lies. So this is getting past the logic and the rationale to what's actually driving you underneath. So to give you a quick example, in the book, for instance, there's a gentleman, Franco, and we talk about in the book how he came to see me. He was already in the industry that he was in, but in that industry, he was floundering, he was struggling. He didn't know why. He obviously is very talented, very highly educated in his area, but he just was not breaking through and he didn't know why. So we began to look for what was his one red thread. And I said, where in your life are you failing the most? And of course, you know, he was, well, I'm not doing that as well as I could do in business. And I said, really, emotionally, where does it feel like you're failing the most? Not where are the numbers. He took a pause and he went, relationships. And I said, okay, what's going on? He goes, I've been married before. I never commit to another relationship because I just don't trust women. And I said, but okay, are you single right now? And he's like, well, I'm always in a relationship. That's the problem. He was always in. So he seemed to never leave a relationship. There's never a break. He's always jumps from one to the other, but he never trusts that they're going to happen. So we went, okay, so what's the one red thread in that? We began to examine that and we began to look at who are the women you're attracted to. And one of the things he said was, if I'm really honest, I'm attracted to women who have angry eyes. And I go, oh, that's interesting. What is that? So we begin to look at what is the angry eyes. I said, what happens? When he was with me one night celebrating my birthday with a bunch of people, and some nice lady came over and asked him to dance, and he blew her off. And he started pursuing this other woman on the dance floor who seemed like she was an ice queen. So it was like fascinating. What is going on here? And he said, I'm just attracted to these women with angry eyes. So we looked at what that was. This is the beginning of his source code. Where is his emotional source code? What is the anatomy of meaning for him? That's what we look at. So what we find out is that he is pursuing these women because, of course, that's the emotional source code. That's what he remembers in his mom's eyes, because his mom was, let's say, dysfunctional. We'll go with that. And so he was compelled to do that. Now, okay, what's that got to do with business? What's that got to do with what he does in life? And now he's in the top 5% consultants in the world for multi-generational wealthy families, and he serves them. Because his book, and I have his permission to say this because I'm actually featured in the book, his book is called Safe Place. He never had a safe place. Emotionally, his home was a very unsafe place for a multitude of reasons. However, he was pursuing relationships with women who were not safe, and he was pursuing clients who were not emotionally safe. And he was trying to teach them how to be emotionally safe while not feeling safe. So it was incongruence. The incongruence of not feeling safe, but pursuing safety. So he had to shift that around so that he could get back to that source code and find it. Now, when we find that source code inside of ourselves, something magical happens. We become in resonance with ourselves. We start to bring home the disenfranchised parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we've said, it's not okay to be this because I won't be loved. It's not okay to be this because they won't like me. So we start to bring home these places. Now, the interesting thing about it is this. If you are successful, which I'm assuming you are as you listen to this, you got to be successful because you've got to develop leadership focus. You've got to be laser beam focused to get to your outcome. And that's great. We applaud that. It's fantastic. We live in a world that recognizes that. when that happens, very often you have to, of course, because it's a laser focus, you have to push everything else to the side, and it's made you very successful. This work of discovering your one red thread, when you get to that, it's microscopic. It's the other way around. So instead of it being laser focused on a distant focus, it becomes microscopically focused. But you know what happens when you look down a microscope? An entire universe opens. And when that opens, you start to see into yourself, and you start to see those disenfranchised parts that you can bring home. So oftentimes a client will say, well, will I lose my laser focus? And the answer is yes, briefly. But what will happen is that will actually increase as you bring home this microscopic focus. You sort of bring home these disenfranchised parts. So what's really, really cool about it is, I always say to my clients, my job is not to make you more successful. My job is to make you more significant in your life, more significant in the lives of others, and to bring those people home. But when you do that, you serve a greater good. And the cool thing about that is, when that happens, you become deeply fulfilled. And what happens massively is your laser beam focus gets stronger. So you get microscopic, that gives you an increase in that laser beam focus. So that's the book. That's what it's about. And I wrote it because people were struggling to understand their purpose and what purpose really is. And as opposed to a fluffy thing, you get to do the science of it and really dig into it.
Really helpful. And if I just want one follow-up question. If you could define the causes that you care about, if you got like a top 3.
Oh, yeah. Now we're into some, so I'm involved in doing work around ending slavery in the world. We see it as sex slavery, but it's human trafficking in general. There's more slaves in the world than there is today than there was back in the day of slavery. I am involved in a project that is my own. It's called the Dignity Project. And the Dignity Project is about understanding capitalism from a very different way than the traditional American way. It is capitalism with compassion as well as conscious. So it's bringing home those are the two main things. And the third one would be a general care of children. So anything that's something to do with kids, I'm usually involved in that.
So I've got someone that I really want to introduce you to. You just reminded me from when you spoke on Punks and Pinstripes the other day, a guy called Jeff Rotmeyer, who's a Canadian in Hong Kong that is helping the homeless. And he's doing wonderful. amazing work. So let's put a pin in that. If I forget, Please. Remind me, but it'll happen, okay?
Wonderful, thank you.
Let's jump across to Christian to go deep into his book. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much. So this book really is based on the premise that, we always try to plan everything out, and then the unexpected ends up shaping, the biggest parts of our life. And so the curiosity really is about saying, what is serendipity all about, and what is the pattern behind how we are able to cultivate it? And so, just to be on the same page, a couple of examples of serendipity. Imagine the situation, you're in a coffee shop, and if you have erratic hand movements like I do, you spill coffee over someone, and they look up annoyedly, but you feel there might be something in that moment. You don't know what it is, but you just feel something might be there. And now you have a couple of options, right? Option number one is you just say, I'm sorry. You walk outside and you think, what could have happened had I spoken with that person? And then option number two is, I'm so sorry. You start a conversation and that person ends up to be your co-founder, the love of your life, you name it. The point is our reaction to that unexpected moment, our making that accident meaningful ability in a way shape that into potential serendipity. Now, another example, one of my favorites actually, a company I've been working with in China. They produce washing machines and refrigerators, and they had farmers call them up and say, well, your bloody washing machine is always breaking down. Well, why is it breaking down? Well, we're trying to wash our potatoes in it and it doesn't seem to work. And so what would we usually do? We would probably say, well, don't wash your potatoes in the washing machine. It's not made for that, right? We have a plan for this. Like it can't be that you wash your potatoes in there. They did the opposite. They said, you know what? That's unexpected that you're washing your potatoes there. But actually, there's a lot of farmers in China who might have the same problem. So why don't we build in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine? And that's how the potato washing machine unexpectedly became a new product for them. Now, if you look at up to 50% of innovations and inventions, right, everything from Viagra, penicillin, you name it, they are all somehow coming out of a similar logic, which is something unexpected happening, some kind of accident or something going wrong, but then someone doing something with it, connecting the dots and turning that into a positive outcome. And so that's really the idea that I'm following in this book, to say, hey, look, once we look at serendipity, not only at that one event, it's not like synchronicity, right? Synchronicity is about, it's a beautiful coincidence in time, right? That I bump into a friend I haven't seen for 20 years. That's beautiful, but that isn't enough. Like, I have to do something with that moment. And that's what serendipity is. Serendipity is the process of spotting and connecting dots. So it's smart luck. And, you know, the difference then, of course, to blind luck is the stuff that just happens to us, right? Being born into a loving family, all these things we can't really influence, at least not that I know of. And then serendipity is really about smart luck. And it's a process of spotting something in the unexpected, connecting the dots and doing something with it. And so the beautiful thing is that every step we can do something with it. We can create more serendipity triggers. So we can put more dots out there. And I'll talk about this in a second, how we can create more meaningful accidents. But also we can then do something whenever there is potential dots, we can connect them and actually kind of, you know, follow through with. And so, you know, a couple of practices that I found excited and that are discussed in the book. One is the hook strategy. The hook strategy is all about saying, how do you put as many dots out there as possible that other people can connect for us? And so to give example, there's this wonderful entrepreneur in London, Ollie Barrett. And if you would ask Ollie this dreaded question, what do you do, right? That puts people into boxes, but that everyone asks at every conference apparently. He wouldn't just say, I'm a technology entrepreneur. He would say something like, I'm a technology entrepreneur, recently read into the philosophy of science, but what I'm really excited about is playing the piano. And so what he's doing here is he's casting 3 potential hooks where you could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. My sister is teaching on the philosophy of science. You should give a guest lecture. Oh my God, such a coincidence. I'm hosting piano matinees. You should drop by. The point is that the more we get aware of what are the kind of themes in our life that we want to put out there as hooks, the more other people can then pick and choose whatever they find most interesting, rather than us pitching on them and trying to convince them of something. And so I'm a big fan of doing a serendipity journal. That's essentially saying, what are you most interested in at the moment? What are the key themes? You know, in my case, it's taking the serendipity mindset and trying to get into as many curricula and organizations as I can. And I try to bring that into every conversation. I try to seed it everywhere. And every one of us can do that in their kind of serendipity journal. What are 3-4 key themes that I seed into, you know, the last sentence of that email, or that kind of random conversation with the uncle who might unexpectedly know someone who he can put us or she can put us in touch with, and then create that new business opportunity. So we can really use those kind of strategies like the hook strategy to create more meaningful accidents ourselves, but also we can do that in organizations, right? And so a lot of the book is also about saying, yes, we can cultivate serendipity as individuals, but also how can we cultivate that for organizations? How can we develop practices that are not about changing the organization? You know, every organization, even startups, are resistant to change, right? Like that, like everyone always thinks they're so open-minded. Yeah, as long as it is open-mindedness in their definition. But then when it comes to, you know, changing too much, people get a little bit nervous. And so the idea here is, it's not about changing everything. It's about thinking about what are the existing processes, the existing structures, and how can we build a little bit of serendipity thinking into that? So for example, can we build one question into the weekly meeting that asks, what surprised you last week? Was there something unexpected? Like, you know, if you had a team meeting and you were that potato washing machine producer, you would essentially ask them what surprised them. They would tell you, yeah, you know what, like farmers were washing their potatoes. That's strange, isn't it? And you would say, exactly. And you legitimize the idea that the unexpected is not an error. It's not something that our planning was bad, but actually you reframe that away from serendipity as a potential threat or a lack of planning to a good sign of a corporate culture that is part of what you've created. And that's really kind of as a last thought on that. We did a couple of studies with the world's top CEOs, where we sat down with the CEOs and said, if you're the CEO of MasterCard, what is it that really makes you successful? And what a lot of them have in common, over 40 of them, is that they all somehow are really good at saying, here's the sense of direction. Here's approximately where we're going, right? So if I'm MasterCard, Ajay Banga at MasterCard, for example, would say, hey, I want to get 500 million people into the financial system that were previously unbanked. And by doing this, I can help them become entrepreneurs and so on. So that's my North Star now. That's where I want to go. But also, I know that the world is changing fast. So here's my approximate strategy. Here's approximately where I want you to go. But I'm telling you already now, I want you to question that. I want you to think about what are better ways to go about this so that we can adjust the strategy as we go. And so the beautiful thing here is you connect the North Star idea that people know what to connect ideas to, but you also give them the legitimacy to not feel they are questioning the big leader if they come up with an idea, but actually it's part of the leader's vision that they come up with an idea. And that is really kind of the ability then to both have authority in saying, I know where we're going, but also allow people to have actually serendipity happen and integrate that into the company. And philosophically speaking, Peter, I can't finish this without, being the German I am. I come from Heidelberg, where there's the philosopher's way, and Goethe and Schiller and all these kids were writing a lot of poems there. And Goethe had this beautiful idea that if you take someone as they are, you make them worse. But if you take them as who they could be, you make them capable of becoming who they can be. And that's what serendipity is all about. Serendipity is about potentiality. It's about what could be out there. It's about looking at a former drug dealer and not saying, you're a former drug dealer. It's about saying, wow, you could be a teacher. You have a lot of social capital. You're resourceful. If you can inspire people, you make it cool to be a teacher. So you turn a whole community around. So serendipity is all about connecting the dots in that kind of potentiality, which is why we can train that. And that's what the book is all about.
Yeah, I love all of that. And even the way you spoke about the hooks, my least favorite question is, what do you do, right? Who cares, right? The way I approach it is, look, what is your story? Just tell me your story. And along the way, I'm going to hear things that resonate with me, and then I'll come back to those later. So I always like to listen first, and then I go, oh yeah, by the way, I've got 5 people I need to introduce you to, plus a book and a podcast and, all this other stuff. And the second best question I like is, what projects are you working on, personal or professional? Or in other words, what do you care about? I spoke about that with Dov, and I've already got 3 or 4 things I need to follow up with him. And then the third question is, how can I help? Without expecting anything in return. And a lot of magic keeps on happening through that. This idea of being the bridge between closed networks, like Christian highlighted in our side chat leading up to this, is that we're not looking particularly diverse today. We've got 5 white guys, and we're from different countries, all those good things, but I know we can do better, and we will. Our previous episodes have been more deliberate. This time around, we've gone to the extreme, but that's okay. Another time we'll have 5, 6 women. That's fine too. Stu, you want to add something?
I do. Does it count that I've got 2% of Southern African hunter-gatherer blood in my DNA?
It does. It absolutely does. Thank you for adding that. All right, let's jump across to Greg, as I know he's going to have some fun here. Whoops, that's me. Let's go to Greg.
Sure. So I was going to kick us off today by reading something that was the original introduction to the book. Before I even knew I was writing a book at that point, it was a journal that was keeping me sane in the middle of my job. So I think the intro is actually going to tell you more about the book than me explaining what the book is about. I wrote the book. I started writing the book. The book came out in, I believe, 2017, but I started writing this, Might Get Me Fired, in 2013. At that time, I was the director of new products at Bloomberg. I had a really prestigious job inside of a huge company. And I hated it. I was so far away from the entrepreneur I once was. And when I started to write the book, I was writing about my first ever startup. My first ever startup was an investment research firm called Innovest that was acquired in 2009. And while I was there, I was the first person to publicly predict the subprime crisis. We got acquired for $22 million. And after we were acquired, we were kind of this weird punk rock like group of freaks who were coming up with some of the most transformative insights into how the stock market was moving, where it was going to go. And then suddenly, and we were very deliberately against Wall Street. We loved finance, we hated Wall Street, but we got acquired by Wall Street, and so had to become one of them. And that was a really tough transition. And so this is actually the original introduction to the book. This is, I guess, the first time this has been aired. First half, I start talking about some of the things that happened at Innovest, but then I fast forward. And what I say in it is now 2013. Innovest was acquired in 2009, and I now work inside of Wall Street. My colleagues are not punk rock miscreants. They are the golfers that Mark was my former boss. And I scorned. My world now bears no resemblance to that gritty startup den of iniquity. Each morning I walk up 3rd Avenue toward my office and I recognize the faces that work with me. We're dressed in the same uncomfortable suits. I know that by the end of the day, someone will have thrown a chair across the conference room. Someone will have lied to me. Some 60-year-old man will put his arm around me like a British headmaster trying to fuck a pupil and impart some obsolete nugget of bullshit wisdom from when they were starting out in the industry. And I will swallow, smile, and thank them for the insight. Later in the day, I may intentionally dribble piss on the floor in a pathetic act of civil disobedience. I may loosen my tie. This book will make many people uncomfortable. It will undress many of the myths and myth makers that have concealed themselves. It will shine a light on a sleeper cell of innovators determined to use finance to build something of real value in an industry that destroys innovation to save itself. This book is unapologetically and completely honest. I am honest about what I'm proud of, but also what I hate about myself. I will dwell on many clashes in which I was humiliated and emasculated. I have revisited many of them, superimposing some imaginary revenge fantasy where I vanquish my enemies, but I do not indulge those fantasies here. This book does not declare victory because it cannot. The lunatics still run the asylum. This book is a humble prayer that I am not alone. This book might get fired. Man, reading that now, I'm like, shit, why did I leave that on the scrap room floor? Because I think it's such an honest manifestation of like who I was at the time that I was writing that book. What the book became was, first of all, after I left Innovest and after I became an advisor to some of the largest companies in the world, helping them understand their own obstructionism and understanding the root cause of who their obstructionists are, building the scaffolding and the architecture for the entrepreneurs in their midst to gain traction. And that is always an extremely uncomfortable conversation. You're dealing with people who are incredibly powerful and incredibly wealthy, who have gigantic, fragile egos, and telling them things about themselves that's really hard for them to hear. There's inherently a transition of power that has to take place when an organization starts to innovate meaningfully. And I think where the book was me being in the middle of that power transition and not being thought of as someone who is creating indispensable economic value, but rather being thought of as an insurrectionist whose only purpose is to steal the power from someone who has it already, which was never my intention. And there are a few strategies that I lay out in the book. Among them, never pitch an idea, only pitch an outcome. Number 2, you always have to have a godfather. There is always one very powerful person in the organization who views change as indispensable, who is determined to use their power to drive change forward, and you as the entrepreneur have to build an alliance with them. And three, that you have to create a return on investment that is indispensable and undeniable. You cannot innovate because innovation is an idea that sounds good. You have to be able to put points on the board that your organization cannot live without. And then if people stand in the way of those results, now it's a very personal risk, where they risk incurring the ire of your investors. I'll stop there, because I think the other thing that you see in the book is there's a huge dividing line between the pundits of innovation, the insightful observers of it, and the practitioners of it. And what I really wanted to draw out in the book is the playbook of the practitioners, the people, the battle plan that is written by generals who have never experienced combat is fundamentally different than the battle plan written by the generals who have. And what I wanted to do in this book, and what I'm doing with the others, is explaining what the perspective of the battle plan looks like, what the battle plan looks like from the soldier's perspective when you're in the shit, when you've got bullets whizzing over your head. What are those insights? And when do you actually win the battles? When do you win the war? When you're in the trenches, not just from the gilded corridors of Harvard and Oxford, but when you're in the shit and you're staring into the eyes of a billionaire CEO who wants to kill you just because he feels like you're trying to steal his job. What do you do then? How great an innovator are you at that moment? What do you have to be prepared to say, not say, do, not do? And in many respects, those rules contradict what you might read about in The Innovator's Dilemma.
Very good. Thank you, Greg. And maybe talk a little bit about Punks and Pinstripes. How has that evolved, and what is it all about?
Sure. Punks and Pinstripes. Punks and Pinstripes is an organization for entrepreneurs, and people who are kind of just weird and punks, to connect with one another and empower one another. I created it because I think my tribe is a personality type rather than a job description. Mm-hmm. And there are plenty of organizations for CEOs to become a member. There are plenty of places where you can tap your glass against someone else's glass because they are a startup founder or they're in the music industry. I find that those environments tend to be very inauthentic, that people go on to those stages and go to those cocktail parties and kind of thump their chest about how they're crushing it. I've been to a lot of those myself, and I'm trying to leave as quickly as I fucking can. So I wanted to create an environment that was kind of the antithesis of that, where people who, objectively speaking, were doing things that were impressive with their lives, but there's also a forum for them to say, I'm stuck, I need help, I'm fucking up in ways that I swore I would never fuck up again. Mm-hmm. I keep repeating the same mistakes. All the perks of network in terms of finding new clients, getting a job, finding investment, getting people to do favors for you instead of having to hire someone, etc. I think all of those things happen a little bit more easily when you're having a conversation that is authentic and vulnerable first. And that's definitely been the case with Punks and Pinstripes.
Great summary. Thank you. Stu, and I noticed you're calling yourself Stuart now. What's happened? You've sort of made yourself, very proper.
I've always been proper, Peter. Oh, I don't know. The influence of my mother, perhaps she hates it when I call myself Stu. And it's really funny. Every time I have a new book come out, I'm very proud of it. I show it to her. The first thing she'll say is, "Oh, I do wish you wouldn't call yourself Stu. or every time there's a newspaper article or a magazine piece, exactly the same reaction. So maybe I've just given into that pressure. So, yeah, I'm going to pick up, we started the top of this conversation by saying, what are the dots that can be joined, etc. And Christian, you mentioned serendipity, of somebody maybe spilling a drink on you and you get chatting. Here's one for you. In Hong Kong many, many, many years ago, a waitress in a pub spilt a tray of drinks, not just a drink, a whole tray of drinks over me. We subsequently got married, had 2 kids, and I now have a 3-year-old grandson out of that little bit of serendipity. So that's a great starter, and there's opportunities in every situation, as you pointed out. And the other thing which I want to talk about was Greg, just talking about the whole notion of corporate captivity. I had a formative career in the advertising industry, which I thoroughly enjoyed the energy of it. It was back in the good old, bad old days where you could literally get away with murder in your thought behaviors and your actual behavior. And but the fact that you had to work in that sort of corporate framework really pitched the creatives, I guess, against the framework in many, many unhealthy kind of ways, in terms of crushing our process often, and really confining it, because at the end of the day, I guess we had sold our soul to the corporate devil, and it wasn't art for art's sake. We were creating it on the client's dime. So I sort of get that. But the funny thing is, I figured out that there was a better way of delivering this. So I was in Singapore working for Saatchi & Saatchi at the time. I'd worked for Ogilvy and Bates and all the big boy multinational networks in my career, had a very rich and rewarding time. But being the young punk I was at that time, figured there's a better way of delivering a better result for our clients. And so I hopped ship, and very precociously, we started our own agency. When I say start our own agency, it was myself and my best mate. And we were basically lying around the swimming pool at the Hyatt Hotel in Singapore, earning thousands of dollars a day, freelancing, copywriting, etc., etc. Eventually, we thought, hey, you know what? We're getting so damn busy, and having to book flights and having to invoice and all this admin stuff, which is rushing up at us. What if we join forces? So we started by sharing a secretary, pooling our resources and hiring her. And within 7 years, we'd actually built that into a $20+ million business, and then sold that out. So Greg, you were saying, you sort of hated Wall Street and sold out to Wall Street. I did exactly the same. And we exited that agency by selling it to the very people that we hated, because we had proved the hypothesis that there was a better way of delivering better work, better advertising, better service, better results. And we were handsomely rewarded for that, shall we say. And cashed out, sailed off into the sunset. And that freed me up in terms of this whole afterlife, after corporate life, that I've enjoyed for the last 20 years, which has just led me into wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things, which brings me to why I guess I'm actually on this conversation tonight with Peter. And, he talked about how we met, etc. So let's get into what the book I'm talking about tonight is, which is Pivot Power. What's it about? The subtitle gives you a clue, which is, zigzagging your way through this crisis. And it hints at 25 ways of zigzagging your way through this crisis. And I put "and the next" because, this is a, once in a century pandemic, but there's going to be others. There's always others, black swan events, things that we just don't see happening. So, in a way, it's a playbook. In a way, it's a toolkit. It's a way of giving you, I guess, a systematic way to approach, shit, where do we go now? You know, we thought we were in a good situation. We thought we had a good market. We thought we had a great client base. Where do we go next? How do we do this better? And I guess the analogy which I kick off the book with in the foreword is all about sailing. I loved sailing when I was growing up. We had a number of yachts, catamarans in particular, which were a lot of fun, hanging out in a really strong wind on the trapeze and absolutely redlining the thing. And I wasn't a particularly scientific sailor, if you want to call it that. I did a little bit of scientific wild-ass guessing in terms of what the wind was doing and where I should be positioned according to the wind. But I always noticed that there were people flying past me that were maybe just, I don't know, doing something slightly different in the positioning of the hull, in the way that they'd set the sheets on the different sails, and probably most importantly, in the angle to the wind that they were choosing. And I kind of worked it out that it was key. So when I came to this book, and the book itself is a pivot. I talked about how I pivoted my life at the beginning of last year with COVID, completely just thrust upon me at no notice at all, as borders closed ahead of me, behind me, etc., etc. And I found myself pretty much locked into Fortress Australia. And if I can just tell you a little bit about the, I guess, the sailing analogy and using, I guess, pivoting, thinking of it as finding a better wind. Now, that could be a better wind in your sail for your personal life or your professional life, your venture, your enterprise, etc., etc. And as I looked into it, and this is kind of just reading a couple of paragraphs from the book itself. In the first chapter, I say, one mind-blowing fact that I learned is that yachts can actually sail faster than the wind. I didn't know that before. This is usually between a beam reach, which is 90 degrees to the true wind, and a broad reach, which is about 135 degrees away from the true wind. So it involves a bit of trigonometry, and I mean, I really bombed out at calculus at school. I didn't see the need for measuring lighthouses, which seemed to be what trigonometry was about. And in the 40 years since I left school, I've never yet had to measure a lighthouse. But this whole thing about sailing involved a lot of trigonometry, which would probably explain why the term I got most frequently acquainted with was called getting in the irons. And this term dates back to the days of the big old wooden boats transporting prisoners who were shackled to the deck, literally in irons. So getting in the irons refers to when you're sailing directly into the wind. Right, because what happens there is that your sail is then just flapping madly all over the place. All right, that's there's no point of resistance because you're pointed straight into the wind. So often in business, we find ourselves in this unfortunate situation. There's no resistance. We're not getting any traction. We're not actually going anywhere. So I use this analogy of sailing kind of throughout the book, and there's a really good diagram there, which I didn't realize that Princeton University actually had a sailing club, but there's a really great diagram which helps you understand the different positionings to the wind and how each of those can really help you to go faster. So worse still, it's really difficult to steer out of it once you're in the irons. So it's going straight into wind. It's really actually difficult to get out of it when you're sailing. And I say it's to find the wind because you've got no momentum. There's nothing that you can build on or leverage. And I guess the analogy there is in business, if you have no momentum, if your product lines are not selling, your solutions are not selling, you have no cash flow, no resources to actually finance your next leg. And this is really important. You know, you need the momentum, you need the cash reserve. Otherwise, how can you innovate? How can you go to that next thing? And pivoting is really about finding that next thing. What's the next best thing? What can we do here? And so we find ourselves in a raft of different situations. And I think the thing is, okay, why did I write the book? I found myself in a life pivot. I say COVID had thrown me this curveball. I've been living in Asia for, 25 years. The last 11 of those were in Thailand. Suddenly, I found myself in Australia. I thought, well, I don't know how long I need to be here. Is it weeks, months? And I thought, okay, as I'm here, what do I do? My previous business model was highly fun. Gosh, I was on the airplane to, sometimes 4 different countries in a week. I think my kind of record was, if I remember correctly, 8 days, 4 countries, 6 workshops. And, it was fun. Dov, you probably relate to this. You're all over the place. You're living on adrenaline. It's good fun. But the funny thing is, now that I can't jump on an airplane, now that I actually get to come home and sleep in my own bed every night and be a part of a local community, I love it. And I cannot see myself going back to that former life. I'm running workshops now by Zoom, which is not the same. I love to look people in the eye, and I'm very tactile kind of a person. I enjoy the energy of a face-to-face workshop, but I will not go back to that former lifestyle. Now that I see it from the outside, I view it as madness, and it was certainly taking a toll on my physical health. And Peter, you'll probably ask me, what cause am I passionate about? Well, I'll answer the question before you ask it. Mm-hmm. I'm really, really passionate about finding cures for cancer. I've actually, through the past 5 years, suffered 2 completely separate life-threatening bouts of cancer, which were back-to-back. And thankfully, I'm in remission for both of those now. Still being monitored, of course, because these things don't go away. But, I think that's been a part of my own reflection on what's important in life. And I guess the ability to reconnect with family back in Australia here. As I say, I have a son and a daughter and a beautiful grandson. And that's the important stuff in life. So that's the kind of cause.
If you didn't mention it, I was going to jump in there and say, I think you're missing 3 really important parts of your story. One was the big C word. Mm-hmm. Another is how maybe it's propelled your productivity, because how long did it take you to write Pivot Power?
Okay, let me tell you the story of this particular book. I think the COVID crisis gave rise to 2 buzzwords. One is pivot and the other is Zoom. Yeah. And I thought, all right, what the world needs right now is people just needed to know, damn, here I am. But it's not a case of what is, it's a case of what if. It's not a case of what I've got, but what we could be or what we could become. And so I was determined to, and Christian, please, as my German tutor, could you please, for once and for all, give me the correct pronunciation of the word Zeitgeist? Zeitgeist? Zeitgeist?
Zeitgeist, yeah. Yeah, perfect.
Zeitgeist. Yeah, okay, Zeitgeist. Okay, great, thank you. I guess I wanted to capture that in terms of writing a book about pivoting, because everybody suddenly was talking about it, needing to do it, and needing to do it in a hurry. And so I thought, well, okay, the book is about pivoting, but the book itself is a pivot. And I was sitting at, when I say at home, I was actually just in my mum's place at that time, because I just arrived back in Australia and found myself suddenly stateless. And it was on the Saturday morning that I just had an idle moment. I thought, maybe I should just put down everything that I know about pivoting, package it up, give people the toolkit, because, I've been delivering workshops on the stuff anyway. And that was on the Saturday. And I thought through it and I thought, well, in the spirit of, getting shit done and testing a hypothesis and getting something out there, I should do this in real time. So I set myself a deadline of, wait for it, 1 week. I thought, I'm going to publish this book. I'm going to write this book, publish it. It's going to be available in Amazon within a week. So I started on the Monday morning, and the following Monday evening, it was live available on Amazon, and you can buy it right from there, folks. It's not in the foyer on your way out. It's on Amazon right now.
Meanwhile, I've been sitting on my ideas for my book for 6 years, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? So that was a good wake-up call. But
I can trump you on that, because I've just bought this book out, actually, Tales from the Tiger's Den, which I don't know, it's about 150,000 words. I've been working on that for just progressively for about 15 years. And the book which I'm working on at the moment, which is a military history World War II book, I've been working on that on and off for 12 years. So they're very different types of things.
Well,
they're
you've
different
got parallel projects, that's also useful to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And they're different books for different reasons. But with the pivoting thing, I wanted it not just to be a book about pivoting, but to actually illustrate to me what were the really important fundamental principles of pivoting, which is doing something. Maybe it's not 100% right. In fact, I can guarantee you it's not 100% right, because when I look back
it links back to the lean startup, right? Which was the big thing I got out about that. From that is it gives you permission not to be perfect, which is a great change in mindset for people or companies that think I'm only going to release a perfect product.
Exactly.
So I my book as literally a minimum viable product. It's version 0.0. I'm more interested in what happens next, which is meet people like you guys and start conversations, find causes and interests, things that we all care about, and then collaborate. And you do that in perpetuity, and it becomes an adventure. That's my main. If you said, okay, what is your purpose in one word? Adventure. And maybe I've got, I haven't had cancer, so maybe my answer might change if I was overcoming that. But in the meantime, you make the most of what we've got here, which is kind of how we've come together, I think.
That might be the other reason why I gave myself a week to write it. I wasn't guaranteed of living longer than a week at that point. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, but interesting you talk about Eric Ries, because, I think he outlined was 7 or 8 different pivot types. And I think we owe Eric Ries a great amount of credit for bringing the whole sort of lexicon of pivot into our world. It existed before, but he popularized it, of course. But I think he outlined 7 or 8 types, and I have gone on and I outline 20 in the book, 20 different types of pivot, and I give examples of about 3 or 4 for each of the types of pivot. So yeah, I mean, to me it was just very absorbing, and this segues into
we're at the hour, so I think we're going to have to wind it up. I know Stu, I think Greg might have just dropped out, but plenty to continue, I think. All the different permutations of people that we've got here. Would love to continue this conversation, but I guess just for consistency with the prior episodes, this is our 4th, and each of them, I'm trying to make this as random as possible. So you can have someone that's written a children's book, a photography book, a cookbook, a business book, all coming together and just seeing what emerges from that. And jumping back to Christian's comments earlier, I've kind of discovered that serendipity can be completely predictable and repeatable if you bring like-minded kind of people together. So that's one of the big goals here. I am going to just show a little video at the end here. There's actually a few I could show. My normal collaborator here is Chris Pelmore, and I discovered him through serendipity. We're both interested in the power of gratitude. I think, Dov, I noticed you sign off, curiosity, gratitude, and something else. We've actually both been invited.
Gratitude, respect, and curiosity.
Respect is number 1 rule of anything, right? We've been invited randomly by someone to do a 24-hour gratitude live stream coming up. I think it's on the 1st and 2nd of September. So I'm going to host a couple of hours. Chris is going to do another. We've got friends and colleagues, former colleagues in Athens and around the world that are jumping on. So if you feel like jumping on for a couple of minutes and talking about what you're grateful for, that would be a great spin-off from here. I'll forward the details subsequently. And so Chris has a little video for the book that he wrote about gratitude, which was letters to 2020. So even though the year sucked, let's think about the things that are actually worth recognizing and acknowledging. So I'm going to show his little video here briefly. All right, that's my training wheels. Greg's back briefly. I don't know if he's appearing on the video though. For some reason, I seem to have lost two of you. There we go. So closing comments. Anything, Dov, that stands out for you?
Well, first of all, just to say thank you to everybody. I loved what everybody had to say, and of course, fully agree with everybody. I'm a great believer in diversity, but I believe in cognitive diversity more than anything.
Yeah.
And that we need to surround ourselves not with people who agree with us, but people who disagree with us, and find the common ground within that. And we all came from different areas, and we come to the same place, which in many ways is around serendipity. What is the thread that binds us all? And I love that. So thank you, all of you. And I always sign off with, stay curious, my friends, stay curious, because I believe, it's my truth, it's not the truth. I believe that curiosity is the cure for the world. And so if you can stay curious about the person who shows up in front of you, who appears to be an enemy, or appears to be a friend or a lover or whatever it is, or appears to be a person spilling drinks on you, who knows? Maybe that's your wife. So stay curious, my friends. Stay curious.
Absolutely, I totally agree. Christian?
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely. And I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for bringing us together, Peter. It's wonderful to hear, to your point, all the serendipity in the room. And Stuart, I love the waitress example of literally, I might reach out with a request for using that as a case study. That's beautiful.
And if you're like in Hong Kong, just to extend this, we now have talking about creating systems instead of goals and creating traditions. We now love to have people come and stay with us in Hong Kong, and the more variety, the better. And what we realized is, sure, we get to hang out and spend more time together, but it's the conversation that our 4 children have had with these people from all around the world. In 1 month alone, we had a documentary filmmaker from LA, we had a musician from Melbourne, and we had a Maasai tribal dude from Tanzania. And it was kind of, that's like a living library walking through, your house every so often. So you're all welcome. Next time travel actually resumes, I fully expect you to come and stay for a week or 2 or 4, whatever you want. Greg.
Sorry, did you comment?
Any comments? Yeah, I did. Just any closing comments? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's been I'm thank you for bringing us together. A quote that I heard once was run with people who seek God, but run away from people who believe they have found him. And so as it pertains to curiosity, I feel like that's kind of the crew we've assembled. It seems like there's a big appetite for seeking the truth, kind of the social appetite for curiosity. So good books come out of those mentalities, and you meet interesting people if you're open to it.
Yeah, I think learning and unlearning, this willingness to, and looking for blind spots is a useful exercise, because they're always going to be there somewhere. Stuart, I'm going to please your mother here.
Yeah, 3 chords and the truth, Greg. That's what we're after. What I love. Thank you very much for inviting me into this this conversation this evening. Great to some of you guys I know, and now the rest of you I know as well, and we take the conversation forward from here. Tonight's been very strong on 2 of my favorite words. Serendipity is actually my favorite word in the English language. I just love the sound of the word, the connotation of the word, and what it represents in terms of how we behave. And curiosity. I think I'm just driven by curiosity. I think that's why I write. That's why I create. That's why I am who I am, with interest in people and life and the world. It's curiosity. And all I do is.
I think the dividend is adventure. I like to have 3 words. If you're gonna, if you got 1 and you go with 2, you got to end up with 3 bullet points on a slide, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Don't stop at 2.
Don't stop at 2. Never stop at 2. Which goes against the other adage, Peter, which is leave them wanting more.
Yeah, no, that's true. But hey, I'm going to break another rule. I'm going to just mention your current day job. I think you're still doing this, right? You flipped and pivoted into being a bus driver. Is that right?
Yeah.
For the town of Orange. So to me, that's next level in terms of pivoting.
Yeah, what's cool about driving buses is you get to take 10 tons of beautiful Mercedes or Volvo technology through the beautiful vineyards of the Orange district of New South Wales, and it leaves your mind free to wander. And I just find that my creative productivity has gone through the roof, because the other beautiful thing about it is you have some hours in the morning where you drive a shift, or you might have hours in the afternoon where you drive a shift, and it leaves me a great sort of a 3 or so hour window in the middle of the day, which is where I get to hammer out the next book or books. So
don't underestimate the benefits of being a bus driver, I think is what you're saying.
Absolutely,
I've got
absolutely. And we're hiring.
Very good. A short outro video here. If you want to just hang on for a second, that'd be cool. I'll just show this, and then I'm going to end the broadcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are out. That was my first time using, StreamYard.